Welcome back, everybody. Let's take a breath together. We're talking about changing the world this month and the fact that it's up to us to change the world. We can't look to anybody else to do that. And we can no longer sit back and complain about what is this world coming to and about all the division and divisiveness and all the separation and all the stuff that we see that we don't like. It's up to us to make the change. It's up to us to do something different. It's up to us to consciously choose. And that's what I'm talking about this month also, consciously choosing. We can consciously choose to live the kind of life we want to live. We can consciously choose to live in the kind of world we want to live in. We can consciously choose how we want our world to be and then go about consciously choosing to do those things that work, that we can do in our own unique way. And so this month, I'm just continuing to encourage us to know it's up to us. It's up to us. We can stop blaming. We can stop judging. We can stop criticizing. We can open our hearts and open our minds and consciously choose to do what is before us to do to change this world. And when we can to change our world, and when we can change our world, then the world changes. Because everything starts right here, right now, right where we are. And so that's what I'm inviting you to do this morning, is to look at how can I change the world? How can I make a change? How can I do something different where I am, from where I am right here and right now? What kind of world do I want to live in? What kind of life do I want to have? What do I want for my grandchildren, my children, for those who come after us? And those are all questions that we really have to ask ourselves now. And what can I do now? How can I be now? And you know, it's more about being than about doing anyway. It's more about being than about doing. It's more about opening our hearts and opening our minds and allowing ourselves to be guided and directed. It's about recognizing and remembering who we are, where we're from, whose we are. And when we can remember these things, when we can move back into that place of knowing that truth, then we can really consciously choose the world, change the world. Consciously choose to change the world. Easy for me to say. But I invite you to really lean into that notion of consciously choosing today. Consciously choosing. And this little book that I was talking about, Yes, You Can Change the World, Aman Matwani is the author of the book, and he talks about the most important thing that we can do to change the world has to do with the way we interact with each other. And he says the most important thing that we can do is to become completely aware of the intrinsic worth of every person you encounter. Become completely aware of the intrinsic worth, the intrinsic value of every person you encounter. That sounds so simple, doesn't it? It sounds so easy. It's like, oh, it can't be that easy. But just think about it. When we consciously choose to recognize, to be aware of the intrinsic worth, the intrinsic value of every person we encounter, don't you see how a shift can happen? Don't you see how things can really change just from the way we see the world? Because the world, we live in the world that we see. As we see the world a particular way, we change the way we see the world, we change the world itself. We change our own world when we change the way we see the world. And as we change our own world, the entire world changes. And so when we become aware of the intrinsic value of every person we encounter, every, did you get that? Every person we encounter, not just some and skip over this one and skip over that one and maybe that one, but no, every person we encounter has intrinsic value. Because our value, that intrinsic value, is that is natural to us, that is real. That's the value of the work that we had coming into this plane, and we all came in with it. We're all here with it. We are all and each made in the image and likeness and out of God itself. And so we each have value. We each have that value by our Creator. Now, there are other things that may happen in our lives There's certain things that might come up that may cover that over, or we may not be able to see it. I call it and Howard Thurman calls it the grit and grime of the journey. The grit and grime of our journeys, whatever those journeys may be, may have covered over that value, covered over that worth, so that it's not so easily seen, it's not so easily recognized, but it's still there. And it's up to each of us to be completely aware of it. Because when we aren't aware of it, when we are not completely aware of it, when we don't just really know that it's there, then we don't look for it. And when we don't look for it, we don't see it. And when we don't see it, then we can't change the world. We can't change it for the better anyway, bless you. Because when we don't see it, then we don't acknowledge it. We don't act like it's there. We forget that it's there. And so what we have to do is to come to know that everyone that we encounter has intrinsic value. Everyone that we encounter has a special purpose for being here. We have to consciously choose not to let those separators that we live with come into play in our lives, in our daily goings and comings. You know, those separators like socioeconomic status, race, gender, homelessness, all kinds of things. Those are the things that separate us. And those are the things that make us stop looking at each other and stop recognizing that there's worth, there's value within that person. There's value, there's worth within each person. Just think about it. If everybody that you come in contact with would recognize the intrinsic value in you, the intrinsic worth within you, how would that make you feel? How would that change your life? If everybody you encounter recognizes that intrinsic worth within you, wow. Think what that would do for your self-esteem, your self-confidence, your self-awareness about the way we would move through the world if we knew that everybody we encountered sees our intrinsic value, our intrinsic worth. That would be pretty powerful. If everybody in this room decided that every person you encounter, every person you see, every person you meet, that you're going to recognize and be aware of their intrinsic value, what a difference that would make. Just us in this room. Just half of us in this room would make a difference. Because you know what happens when we start to recognize the worth in someone else? It's like switching on a light within them. And they begin to respond to that. They begin to act accordingly. And as they do, they act accordingly with the people they come in contact with. And as they do that, then those people act accordingly to the people they come in contact with. And the same thing happens over here. And it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on ad infinitum. We can change the world just by recognizing the intrinsic value of everyone we encounter. Simple. Really simple. What it means also is that we have to make sure that we take the time to connect with the people that we encounter. You know, the Gallup poll, the Gallup pollster guy, says that Americans are the loneliest people in the world. That Americans are the loneliest people in the world. That there are so many of us here, but we're so busy, and we're all in our own world, and we're all doing our own things, and we're all keeping to ourselves in a different kind of way, that we become the loneliest people in the world. We don't have to be that. We come in contact with a lot of people all the time, but how often do we connect? How often do we connect with the people that we come in contact with? And so what I'm talking about today is connect, communicate, change. Connect, communicate, change. We are a community of care, connection, and creation, right? That's our vision, to be a community of care, connection, and creation. How many people in this room have you connected with today? How many people that you're sitting right next to that you connected with today? There's so many ways that we can connect to each other. And when we connect, it means that we're relating. It doesn't mean we have to spend a lot of time with them. That doesn't mean anything. We're not going to be focused on how much time we spend as the quality of the time we spend. What kind of time do we spend with each other? Do we look each other in the eye? Do we acknowledge the presence of someone else that we're with? Do we find things to talk to someone about or to say something to someone about? Do we give a smile or a nod or a hug? That's a way of connecting. That's a way of connecting. And when we connect with people, that's when we are really acknowledging our awareness of their intrinsic value. Because we see them. When we're connecting with another person, we're saying, I see you. Do you know how powerful that is? I see you. All of us want to be seen. All of us want to be seen. All of us want to be seen. And so when we just connect, if you're in the grocery store line and you connect with the person in front of you or the person behind you, rather than standing there going from one foot to the other and sighing real loudly because the line is so long, or the person before you can't get the credit card machine to work, or whatever else may be going on. But we just pause for a moment, take a breath, and connect with another person. That's how we can change the world. That's how we can change our lives and the lives of others. A couple of years ago, I took my car into the dealership for service one morning early, like 7:30. And the service manager showed me, this was my first time there, service manager showed me into the waiting room, and he told me that there was coffee and donuts there, and to help myself to that. Well, I'm just like, I'm not gonna eat any donuts, so I'll sit. I had some writing to do, so I was sat with my writing. And when I came in to the area where we sit, I walked between the first row and the second row of chairs and sat down, and I noticed there was a woman sitting just to the right of me, and ahead of me, but just to the right. And I didn't pay any attention to it, but I sat down and I started writing. And as I sat there, I realized that she had gotten up and gone over to the donut box. And when she sat back down, she had the biggest chocolate-covered glazed donut I'd ever seen. And I had never seen one that looked that good either. I don't like glazed donuts. But I sat there and I looked at that donut over her shoulder, and I kept trying to do something, and I kept looking up at that donut. And by this time I had my full attention. And she was reading something too, but every time, instead of just biting it, she would hold it up and look at it and then bite it. So every time she held it up, my eyes were going up too. It's like, and I became consumed with the thought of that donut. So I finally just got up and went over to the box and just got a glazed donut. And I brought it back to my seat. And just as I was passing her, I said to her, "This is all your fault." And so she looked around and said, "Excuse me?" And I said, "This is all your fault. I hadn't planned to get a donut today. But you're sitting there eating that donut like it's the best thing you've ever had." And I couldn't resist. And so she smiled, and I sat down, and I started eating the donut, and I said to her again, "This really is all your fault." And so we struck up a conversation. And she talked a little bit, and I talked a little bit, and she told me about, she comes early to the car place because she drives her daughter. She lives in another little township out from Phoenix, and she drives her granddaughter in at 7 o'clock in the morning to a private school, and so she comes to the dealership early in the morning. And we talked, and then it was time for her to leave because her car was ready, and we were still talking, and we agreed that why don't we bring our cars in another time and meet for coffee or meet for breakfast or meet for something. And so we did. So we started making these little car repair dates. And she even got to the place where she would call when she called in for her, we had the same service manager, and when she called in to have her car repaired, she would ask him, it was the time for me to have mine repaired so that we could make our date at the same time. And then he would call me and say, she's bringing her car in, do you want to bring yours in? And so we've been doing this now for a couple of years. She doesn't have email. She has a cell phone, but she doesn't text. She doesn't do Facebook. She talks on the phone if you call her. And she writes these wonderful letters. She sends cards to me for every occasion. Every holiday, I get a card from her. She writes me letters, letting me know. I've been really busy in the last year, so I haven't had as much time, and she knows that. But she writes me these long letters. I got a 16-page letter from her the other day. She just had surgery. But what I love about it, it's my time to just savor my connection with her. When I got the letter, it was so thick, I didn't open it. I didn't want to rush through it. So I put it in my purse, and I knew that there would be a special time when I could just take the time and read that letter. And she writes, and she just tells me all about the things that are going on in her life, and she asks about the things that are going on in mine. And then whatever she's doing, she takes a lot of pictures. She makes pictures of those, and she writes on the back of the pictures, and then she sends me pictures so that I can see. When she was redecorating her dining room last year, and she took pictures of different things she was doing, and then behind each picture she wrote a description of what that picture was about. Do you know how much I cherish that? Do you know what a wonderful connection that is? She just had surgery back in June, and she's still recovering from foot surgery. And she sent me pictures from the day of the surgery to the cast being on, to the boot being on, to now everything's off, but there's still pins in it. So I have pictures of her feet. And behind each picture, she tells me what's happening at each time. But that's how I'm keeping up with her life. I'm not that great at letter writing, but I do send her cards, and I do let her know how much I appreciate so much having that connection with her, having that update on what's going on in her life, keeping up with her, and she's keeping up with what's happening with me. She's recognizing my intrinsic value. I'm recognizing her intrinsic value. I could have passed her that morning and said nothing at all about that donut. But I didn't. I connected with her over a donut, so I call her my car repair donut friend. And I really, really cherish that relationship. I cherish the way it came about. I know about her family knows about me, my family knows about her. Maybe they'll meet at some point, but it's a connection that I could have passed up by not saying anything. It's a connection, it's a relationship that I could have missed out on. It's a lesson that I'm learning from her that I could have missed out on. There's a blessing that I'm getting from this relationship that I could have missed out on simply by just passing by, being busy, getting to my own writing. Connecting. When we connect, it gives us an opportunity to communicate, because connection opens the door to communication. When we connect, then we start to communicate. And communication doesn't always have to always be verbal. It could be nonverbal. Just acknowledging someone else is a way of communicating. And you know, in this book, he talks about the fact that we are, with every encounter we have with other people, we're either cutting them down or building them up. We're either cutting people down or we're building them up. Think about that. We're either cutting them down or we're building them up. Think about all the people that you come in contact with. When we ignore someone, when we close our hearts when we see someone, when we think about how annoyed we may be and respond in that way, or when we don't acknowledge people, that's cutting them down. That's cutting them down. And I always think about the homeless people that we come in contact with, the people who are on the corners with the signs. And when we stop at the light and look straight ahead, or look up, or look around, or whatever, oftentimes that's created by guilt or whatever it is, what other feelings we may have. But when we can just look, even whether you're going to give money or not, but just looking at someone and acknowledging them could make all the difference in the world. Looking at someone and acknowledging their personhood, that's a way of connecting, that's a way of communicating, that's a way of changing the world, because we don't know what impact that may have on that person. We can look at the impact it has on us, because it has to open our hearts. It helps us to connect with who we are. It helps us connect with the source of our being. It helps us to connect with that one life, that one power, that one presence. And that one presence is seeking to connect with itself. Every time we connect with another person, that one life is connecting with itself as that other person, as me connecting with that other person. That's how the one life does. It's always acknowledging itself. It's always seeking expression. It is always seeking. It is always seeking. It is always seeking an open heart. And so when we are in that place of connecting and communicating with each other, that's how we get to number 3, the change. That's how we get to change the world. That's how we get to change ourselves. That's how we get to change our own lives. That's how we get to make a difference in the world. And that doesn't necessarily mean when we are going through these connections and these communications, that doesn't mean that we agree with everything the other person is saying. It doesn't mean that we overlook bad behavior or inappropriate behavior. It simply means that whatever's going on with you, there's an intrinsic value within you. Whatever's going on, however you're acting, however you're speaking, whatever you're doing in this moment, there's that power and that presence and that perfect life within you that is within all things, all beings. And that's what we are constantly coming back to over and over and over again. And that's how we change the world. We start with changing our world. We start with changing the way we view the world. We start with making the world a better place just by acknowledging, just by recognizing the value in someone else. Not trying to change them, accepting them as they are, knowing that we have to believe that there's intrinsic value, even when we don't see it. You know, believing is seeing. We always say seeing is believing, but it's believing that's seeing. It's believing that brings it forth. My teacher used to say, when you can believe more in what you don't see than in what you do see, then what you do see you won't see, and what you don't see you will see. When you can believe more in what you don't see than in what you do see, then what you do see you won't see, and what you don't see you will see. Believing is seeing. So when we start to believe to the point where we really know that there's value in you, and I treat you that way, I look at you that way, because people can see it in our eyes, whether we believe that or not. They can also see it if we don't believe it. So when I treat you according to my belief that you have intrinsic worth, that you have intrinsic value, whether I see it or not, if I don't see it, I will see it. And whatever it is I'm seeing, I won't see. Right? And whatever it is I don't see, I will see. It comes out that way over and over and over again. And so I invite you to connect. It is so important for us to connect. Connect with each other. Connect with the people that we encounter. However brief, but make the connection meaningful. Connect with people. Connect with strangers, not just with people that you know, just connect. Connect with each other here. Connect with each other when you walk out that door. Connect with each other when you're on the freeway in a meaningful, lovable way. Communicate with a smile or a nod, a glance. That's how we change the world. Wherever we are, whatever we are doing, whatever situation we may find ourselves in. Not looking at the outer picture, but knowing that within is the power and presence of God. Within is that only life, that one power, that one presence, that one mind, that one breath. Within is that within which we all live and move and have our being. And that lives and moves and has its being in each one of us. No matter who we are, where we are, how we are. That doesn't change one life. One life. One life. When we continue to recognize and be aware of that one life, then we can believe in the intrinsic value in every person we encounter. That's how we change our world. I invite you to consciously choose to change the world. Let's take a breath as we turn within. And so just taking a breath together now, just knowing that there's only one breath, and that is the breath of God. That is the breath of life. We just allow this one breath to breathe us right here and right now. This one breath is my very life. It's my very breath. This one breath breathes us all. It is the life of us all. It is the source of us all. It is that one breath, that one life, that one mind, that one presence, that one power from which we all get our intrinsic value. We are all of value. We are all of value. We are all of worth. And that worth comes from on high. That worth comes from the only thing that is. And so we recognize it everywhere we go. If there's anything that would block our recognition of it, we release it and let it go right here and right now. So how grateful I am to have the opportunity to speak the word for each of us this day, just speaking a word of healing in our lives, in our world. Knowing that the healing begins with each one of us as our hearts open, our minds open, we release and we let go of that stuff that doesn't serve us. We let go of those separators, those things that would keep us separate from each other, knowing that there is no way that we can ever be separate from that power and that presence of God. And as we recognize this, there's no way that we can be separate from each other. And so any sense of separation is healed by this word that's being spoken here right now, this word of oneness, this word of wholeness, knowing that we are each whole, perfect, and complete just as we are. And this is what I accept for each one of us right here and right now. And so in this moment, as I open the circle of prayer, I pause momentarily so you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer. You may speak them now, silently or loud. And so for all those whose names were spoken here this day, I know that God is right in the midst of everything. God is right where they are, right where each of them is, blessing and keeping and lifting them up and loving and surrounding them with its light and its love and its power and its presence, keeping them safe and secure and going before, making straight their way in all ways and all things, just as God goes before us doing the same. This prayer goes out to anyone on this planet needing a prayer this day. God is in the midst of every situation, every circumstance. I know that all is well, for I know that all is God. And so I simply say, thank you, Father, Mother, God. Thank you, Infinite Presence. Thank you, Divine Mother. I just allow it to be. And so it is.